The God of High School is not afraid about punching characters to the brink of death, and it does so in a very brutal, violent, but in a strange way beautiful fashion, as we see a level of brutality that I don't remember seeing in a tournament arc style anime pretty much ever, especially when characters really don't have to hold back, when the technology in this world can actually fix and heal a broken neck, even if like your friend casually snaps your neck mid-battle, or potentially upcoming friend, and you just kind of go about your day as you walk home like nothing happened. This show uses violence in its combat in such a way that I really can't compare to anything I've seen in a television production for anime, because not only is every character distinct with how they fight, some use classic martial arts, some use a mix and match of their own creation, classic swordplay, maybe they'll use technology, things like that, or you can just be a below-the-belt type fighter like Gang and just absolutely demolish your foes without even caring about their lives. Shows like The God of High School are a make it or break it on pretty much two things. How well do you like the characters, and not even just how well you like them, but how interesting are their personalities, and how good is the battles if you're going to make a literal anime designed around tournaments. And honestly, so far after these two episodes, they've got the formula down to a T, I honestly believe so. I mentioned it with my first impressions in episode 1 review last week about how it's not even just about liking characters, it's about seeing where they're coming from, even if they personally go against your own moral beliefs. Do you like their personality just because it shows you something interesting, even if it conflicts your own personal beliefs and the characters that you're following? And characters like Gang do a remarkable job, because he's someone who literally has restrained his arms and thinks he can kick people around because he's just that powerful. And as the episode gets progressing, it's not like you forgive his actions throughout this episode with how scummy he is, that he's not afraid to casually kill someone in the dressing room as he waits just because someone didn't respond or something like that, or someone responded in a way that he didn't like. But throughout the episode, you see what caused his behavior to at least start shifting to the man that we now see, as we see someone literally on the ground groveling, begging for his life, please forgive me, say my name, things like that we earlier were seeing in the episode when he was going up against someone who's a very classic martial arts fighter, who has a lot of honor and discipline, and to just see something so brutal and violent, but then seeing it from the reverse, you see where he was coming from. Not that we forgive his actions currently, but we understand what led someone to be such a psychopath, and it doesn't just feel like he's just a big bad villain for no particular reason, but rather he kind of became that because of his troubled past, and I imagine it just gets worse and more brutal as it goes on. And depending on where they take his character going forward, if he is going to be a recurring character, I think there's a lot of possibilities for growth in a very interesting way, and I really hope we do get to see more of his character. Please no spoilers if you can avoid it, because honestly, I think out of every character we've seen so far, that's probably the one I'm most interested in at this particular moment, because having someone who's so vile and arrogant and just has no compassion for human life, to then see everything that he's doing to them back onto himself, like, it almost feels like, just with the way they directed it, someone growing up in an abusive household then gets kids themselves and then just kind of portrays what they were taught growing up by their abusive parents and gives it to the kids. It doesn't excuse the action, but then you're like, oh, this makes sense on why they went this way, let's correct this and hopefully push them towards a better path. Or they'll just be a complete scumbag that characters like Jin will have to knock some sense into, quite literally. I think the idea of the restraints was actually a really good introduction to his character, because honestly, he's been restrained by his past, and actually have him rip away throughout the episode just one arm at a time, it honestly made it feel like the character that we saw at face value is finally broke free, and he's releasing all that pent-up anger, and depending on what happens with him with this fight, what happened with just kind of like the test administrators, like a lot of room for a story. And I hope they don't waste that opportunity, because honestly, there's a lot of room to just tell something interesting and brutal, and maybe even compassionate down the line depending on where they take his character. And I'm really excited for that character archetype, probably the most at this point in time. Though the episode wasn't all just brutality and gore, though there was a lot of that, the first kind of half of the episode was more or less just the three central, Yu, Han, as well as Jin, just kind of getting to know each other as they casually walk home because all their homes are in the same direction. I quite like just how much of companions they feel like already. It feels like they've been friends for a lifetime, and sometimes people might want to say, oh, that just feels like it's convenient because here's our three central main characters, they're just casually friends because we need them to be together. And while that can be true for a lot of series, I don't think I would say that with Tower of God. Characters like Jin, who has like a mixture of like a Luffy and Goku personality, just naturally seem charismatic and people would want to be around. even if they get under your skin. Someone like you seems very serious into the book, as we get a decent amount into her backstory about how, she's trying to fight for her basically way of teaching. She's pretty much the last one who knows his moonlit sword style, as she basically cherishes an old relic of a sword that she could probably update and get a much better one, be a lot more useful in battle, but because it was passed down to her, she cherishes it. There's a family connection there. You understand why she's very devoted to this fighting style and why she wants to win. She wants to show that her style is the best, so she can recruit more to basically learn the ways that she was taught. Someone like Jin is just all about the fights. You can clearly see that based on his personality, but also is clearly someone who believes in honor and respect, as seen by how he's treated these three, and also just characters who are almost getting killed in the tournament, willing to break the rules just so they wouldn't die. It's really respectable to me, and someone like Han, who is fighting for money, while may seem artificial, clearly is fighting so he can pay for some hospital bills and things like that, which would explain the workload that he's doing. It just feels like they're respectable drives. It feels like they're almost family and friend driven, so naturally the way they think, it just makes sense that they kind of come together even without understanding all of their personal beliefs and histories. Someone fighting for family's kind of legacy, someone fighting for honor and strength, and someone fighting for basically the ones that they love. It's natural that they would easily connect and just kind of mesh together and feel like they've been friends forever, and that's why they can casually snap necks on the way home, because their technology will just heal it along the way. I actually love the banter, and that's why that moment where basically the sword goes into the water, when they actually do that slap, I was taken back. I was like, wow, this isn't something just about being funny and goofy and brutal. There's actually real human emotions underneath those personas, and some people may look at that slap and say, oh, what's so great about that? Yeah, obviously she was pissed off, and obviously that meant a lot to her, and she was just completely destroyed by what he did with his carelessness, but why is that so interesting? And it feels like it was an act of betrayal. It feels like, even if you don't know how much this sword meant to me, the fact that you were so careless with that object, why would I even want to get to know someone who could be careless like that towards me? But as they start looking for that, and as we start seeing the lights kind of go out, her light goes out as if she's alone, then Jin comes in, lights it up, and then you have our boy Han just come in and blast the entire little river there just up. It was great. It felt like it was a great bonding moment. We got to understand their past, why they're in the tournament, but we also got a good understanding that these characters are going to be pretty good friends, and if they have to go up against each other in the tournament, it's going to be emotionally driven. I honestly believe so, because I love these three characters. And out of the three, honestly, I wouldn't pick a favorite. I think I like them, honestly, pretty much equally at this point in time. I was kind of siding with you last week, but honestly, I like them all. I really think they have a lot of depth to their character based on what we've seen, and this is just surface level depth, so I can't even begin to imagine where their character arcs could go in the future if they really put the time and energy into fleshing them out, while also giving them insane battles and things like that. The thing that's quite interesting with this tournament is it's literally a tournament arc. You have brackets, you go here, he's going to fight the next one, she's going to fight the next one, etc., until the finals. It feels like an absolute brutal tournament of an arc, and honestly, I am all for it. They skim by quite a few fights in this episode to get to the main one, and while some people aren't always the biggest fan of that, especially if those fights did last longer in the webtoon, to be honest, I like just seeing a quick kind of mix and match, being like, oh, he won, she won, he won, she won, and then seeing the main battle, because seeing what we just saw, I wanted the time to be devoted into a brutal Goliath of a beast who seems so corrupt and evil, to get that depth into his backstory, to get the understanding of what he's doing in the present. So as we see the brutality and the ferocity, we understand what led someone to snap like that, but we know we need to stop him. It feels to me that this show, it's not afraid of being action-packed, it's not afraid of being goofy and silly, but it's also understanding the fact that if we don't care about these fighters, there's no point in watching the fights past honestly having it on mute and just watching the pretty spectacle. But because they're honestly designing it like a sporting event, as if we're watching UFC or something to that nature, it's hyped up, the crowds are going nuts, the crowds are sweating when things look too brutal and the refs aren't calling it out. It feels to me like it understands that it's a sports anime at the end of the day, because that's really what it feels like. And because it understands that, it can really focus in on the characters, not try to devise this crazy overarching plot about taking down a corrupt organization. There's clearly some story elements to that nature, as we see, like, the flashing lights at the beginning of the episode, or how it started with episode 1. But clearly it's character driven first and foremost, and it allows for it to be incredibly engaging through and through. Shows like The God of Highschool can be a hit or a miss, especially when you see something hyped up that just feels like it's going to be action oriented, and for the most part that's all it's going to be. And while a majority of the episodes, I think if you combine the amount of action from episodes 1 and 2, it makes up an episode's worth of content. So out of 2 episodes, 1 episode was pretty much fights. And that can be an eye roll depending on your preference in anime, but obviously you gotta have some liking of combat in anime, otherwise this is gonna be boring for probably half of it. but the fact that it actually feels like they're putting focus and emphasis into the characters' personalities and traits, getting a bit of backstory. I'm not sure if the backstory we got in this episode is what should have been in episode 1, but I think episode 1 was a great structured episode to kick it off, make it action-packed, make it exciting. Episode 2 slowing it down a bit in the first half, and then just going balls to the walls insane in the second. I can only begin to imagine where the story could go in terms of just the characters' narratives, how connections will be formed, rivalries will be formed, and if friends do have to go up against friends, which honestly I hope they do, because that's some of my favorite content, especially if it gets towards the later, like they're just doing so good, they keep progressing and progressing, and then Jin and Han have to go up against each other or something like that. It feels like there's not just one character who's better than the other, they all are insanely powerful, and that's what makes the fights great, because you honestly don't know who could win. Just because Jin is an insane badass, it doesn't mean he's the top tier shit out there. Park literally wrecked his shit in this episode, and that's fun that the overpoweredness feels like everyone's overpowered and it's kind of a coin toss of who's gonna win, which makes the fights unpredictable, and that's exactly what you want to see. Overall, God of High School continues to be exciting, exhilarating, and has my mouth watering for more, but let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Whatever you're feeling, please let me know. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So till next time everyone, please take care, and have a good one.